This is one I'm particularly excited about. Very grateful to all the panelists for coming. They'll introduce themselves in a minute, but you see they're quite a diverse group. This talk is about, I suppose, what we call it is the future of food, and you're thinking, okay, Home Tree, a conservation organisation, what's it got to do with food production? 80% of Ireland is farmed. You know, farmers are the key stakeholder in terms of what happens on the land, and biodiversity ultimately, at least terrestrial biodiversity, is entirely subject to what happens on the land. So yeah, farming and food production are critical. I won't introduce you, Sinead. I was so happy to see you take your seat because we were in serious danger of a mantle emerging. the dreaded mantle. It would have hit Twitter within minutes. So what I'll do first, the format here, guys, it seems like every talk we've run out of time. So we are going to try and finish, kind of tighten up at 6 o'clock. That'll give you time to literally run down to Pat Duggan's for a beer. You'll get at 6:30 anything that's happening in Pat Duggan's. I think Andreas is playing a bit of music from 6:30, but really you want to kind of leave this straight away and get down there. No time for showers or anything. The format is pretty straightforward. I'm going to ask everyone just to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about their day job. As I said, I think they're a really interesting group of people. Sinead's role, she's a food consultant and an academic, and she's just prepared a couple of slides, I suppose, to frame the conversation a little bit, to give it a little bit of context. And look, I have a few questions, but I would much prefer if the interaction was between yourselves and the audience, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah. So, first things first, maybe introduce yourselves. What I'm interested in is kind of, what do you do day to day?
All right, thanks, Ray. I'll go first, I presume.
Yeah.
So I work on food security, food and nutrition security, and international development. But relevant to today, especially, my work has started combining more domestic with international just by nature of the shifts we're seeing and how we all deal with food systems and globalization, the effects of globalization and all that. So research and analysis, mostly at the policy level, is what I do.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. Firstly, thanks for the invitation to speak or to be here today. Brian Rush is my name. I'm a dairy farmer first. I entered dairying in 2013, just before the removal of quotas. Previous to that, I was a tillage and beef farmer, probably running a not insignificant size tillage operation and trading in cattle, so would be buying cattle in the west of Ireland, bringing them to finish and then bringing them to process. 2013 I entered dairying, and we've since expanded the business to where we're now employing 3 staff and milking 390 cows on 2 units within about 4 miles of one another. I'm also Deputy President of the Irish Farmers Association, and I am in my final few months of that. I finish up my 4-year term at the back end of this year. Previous to that, I was the Kildare and West Wicklow County Chairman, which, you know, was probably one of the best roles in IFA because you're really on the ground with farmers. Very much enjoyed it. So I'm less of a chairman now, and more of a, I suppose, maybe a mudguard at times. But I'm finished up my time. As part of my role as Deputy President, I also sit on the board of Teagasc. And as part of that, I sit in the subcommittees that deal with research and education, which is a particular passion of mine in terms of agricultural research and education, and also that's the main subway statement. So thank you.
Sam.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Sam Dean. I work as an agronomist with a company called New Generation Agriculture. So we deal in that kind of new area that's coming up with more focused crop nutrition, soil health, building that, improving that, getting farmers to use the resources on their farm more efficiently rather than finding solutions in, would we say, the bulk bag of NPK. So that's kind of the day job, and then in my spare time work as a tillage farmer involved in a farm partnership with my dad and the family farm, where we farm under conservation ag principles. And I can go into more of that later. But
I would love to hear. Like, one of the things I kind of was interested in having you here for, Sam, is I think there's an envision of a food system, and then there's technical opportunities and barriers, and I'm really keen on talking about them. Just to clarify, it's not obvious to everyone what an agronomist is or what NPK is. Maybe there's 20 farmers in the room.
NPK, nitrogen, phosphate and potassium, under their scientific designations.
Man.
But an agronomist is Yeah, agronomist is a new word in Ireland, but yeah, basically up until about 10 years ago was the person who walks around the crops and looks at them. Lovely job. You're just going to go for long walks in fields and look at crops of wheat and barley and cabbage and whatever.
Seems to me what you do, you bring your spade around, you just dig a bit of soil and you're going to run it through your
Yeah, I do a lot of that. There's a new generation of agronomists coming that bring trowels and spades everywhere and are more concerned with what's happening below the ground, because previously we had a very expansive toolbox of, we could bring in solutions, pesticides, that we could go, oh, there's a problem, hit it early, hit it often, problem's gone. Now we're going in and we're having to preempt these issues, and the easiest way to preempt it is by looking at the ground you're in. Sometimes you jump up in the ditch and you look around and go, what sort of landscape are you in? Especially if you're in a new farm has called you up and said, can you come to our farm? You're not so much concerned about the microscopic level. You want to have a look around, what sort of landscape am I farming in here? Then you go look in their soil, right? Oh, look, there's a compaction layer down there. We need to deal with that before we can start, bringing in more inputs and get the ground sorted out. Once the ground starts humming and working, well, then it gets a lot more efficient to grow crops and needs a lot less inputs. So
I have to be very careful to get myself waylaid here on interesting topics, but I was at a conference last year and there was an agronomist from Canada, and she said the first thing she does when she goes into a farm, she goes in and she forces the farmer to, she makes him weigh his tractor. It's your tractor. This is interesting in compaction. Your tractor is far too heavy. Anyway, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, so my name is Brian McCarthy. I founded Corks Roof Top Farm. So I started it in March of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic. So my background is actually I have a wholesale flowering plants business. Had to close that during the pandemic temporarily, and I started this rooftop farm project, which spiraled into the business as it is now. So we employ 7 people. We've got two market gardens where we grow no dig, and
They're not on roofs.
Pardon?
They're not on roofs.
They're not on roofs. They're on,
to be clear,
they're on the ground, terra firma. So we also do pasture raised poultry. We have a retail premises in the heart of Cork City underneath the rooftop farm, and we've a couple of projects in the pipeline at the moment. Restaurant, farm to fork. We're also working with one of the large multinationals on bringing a really exciting alternative for people and how they access their food. So yeah,
Thanks, Brian. Amos?
Yeah, my name is Thomas O'Connor. I'm up from the Kingdom for 12 hours. I own and run a Manor Organic Farm and store in Kerry with my wife Claire. So we have a 25-acre organic farm in Clonagalt and the Dingle Peninsula. We have an organic store inside in Tralee. I'm a retired publican. 15 years ago, I got very depressed. I started seeing what's going around me, and I wanted to do something that was more positive, both for the environment and for the food that we were consuming. So we sold the pub and we bought 25 acres inside the in Clonagalt. We took over an organic shop at the same time. So we spent about 15 years working on that. I'm here today on behalf of Talamh Beo, and I'm involved in a group called Transition Kerry and the Biodynamic Association. And yeah, food is very important, community is very important. As we go through the conversation, like with the likes of Talamh Beo means the living land. It's about reconnecting land, people and community. And the main focus of ours is around food sovereignty as opposed to just food security. So we have a disjointed food system and a disjointed community, but a lot of the issues we see are the fact that we've just become disconnected with nature and natural processes.
Thanks, Thomas. That was super and timely. That's great. Hopefully it gives you a sense of who the lads are and how much we're going to be screwed for time here today. But anyway, so Sinead, it's going to reduce it from 8 to 6 minutes now. But Sinead's going to maybe, as I say, just help frame the conversation a little bit. I have no idea what's in these slides. I trusted that you do a good job. So.
Okay, so I'm going to try and keep it a little shorter, and so maybe I can just take a minute to try and get a sense as to the interest in the room. So I pick through some and not others. Can I first find out, is everybody familiar with Food Vision 2030? Does that ring any bells? And I see hands because I see nods. Okay, so roughly 50%. What about the EU Green Deal? Okay, super, same thing. And Sustainable Development Goals? Amazing. That's nearly everyone. Jesus, that's different to a few years ago. The last one is the UN Food System Summit. Okay. Yeah, there's that person in the back who happens to work with, so. Okay, good. So, what I'm going to do briefly now is run through where we've come from with a view to where we're going in terms of food. So this is at the global, regional and domestic level. So the reason I'm focusing here on the UN Food System Summit is because this happened 2 years ago, and it was the fifth such global summit that's happened in 50 years. So it's been pretty monumental, and the reason for saying this is we're in a very exciting time, in my opinion, in terms of how we perceive food systems, how we perceive food, how we value food, and this has been pivotal in that, the UN Food System Summit. So we've come from a place where the First World Conference in 1974, we were focused on solving famine, quick supply, make sure that people had the food in their mouths. So over the years, and I won't go through the whole 6 dimensions that have emerged, but to a greater understanding of how inequality plays into food insecurity or nutrition insecurity. And more recently, really pertinent to today's conversation, I think, the idea that environmental sustainability and agency, the power of citizens to engage, so very much in line with what Talamh Beo does, and to inform the decisions, the policies that are going to then influence what ends up on our shelves. So where we're going with this at the national, regional and domestic, or global level rather, is in Food Vision 2030's goals. The Farm to Fork was the EU Green Deal, and then the UN Sustainable Development Goals and Food System Summit commitments. So what that means in practice is perhaps not the most ambitious, but what it means to have a sustainable food system is one that delivers food and nutrition security in a way that the economic, environmental and social bases to deliver food and nutrition security for future generations is not compromised. At a very basic level, again, that means economic sustainability, economic, environmental and social sustainability. They're the 3 pillars we need to be looking at when we're making decisions for food systems. So profitable, economic, that's not very difficult for us to grasp, I think. Environmentally, it has to have a positive or a neutral impact. And socially, it has to have broad-based benefits for society. The social one is the most nebulous, the one that most countries are grappling with, but that actually Ireland has some positive examples of, and less positive examples. And I think what we heard earlier from Tim, I don't know who, was really pertinent. I hope we can maybe engage with that. The only other thing I want to say here is that really a difference, and the reason this is underlined, is that when we're thinking about food systems now, we're thinking about interconnections as well, where we might have been looking at siloed components of the food system. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind when we're thinking of interconnectedness. So on the Irish side, Food Vision 2030 has been called the world's first national food systems action plan. So Ireland has already, in theory, demonstrated leadership when it comes to sustainable food systems. And it is also a commitment that Ireland has made to become a leader. Ireland was a little bit more humble compared to the international organisations who say that Ireland is leading in terms of climate smart agriculture, in terms of multi-stakeholder processes. The Irish government said we're going to strive to become a leader rather than saying we are a leader. This is just to demonstrate really the complexity of Ireland's current agri-food strategy, where we've got a whole pile of different sectors, policies, initiatives that are linked to the policy itself. And to touch on the fact that the interdependencies between these different initiatives and sectors we need to be collaborating on, but often they represent elements of competition as well. And so we need to be thinking about collective action, I suppose, very tangibly when we're looking at things like this. So the next 3 slides, I'm going to give some examples of where Ireland is at currently. With a slight delay of data of about a year or 2, apologies I didn't update it for this talk, but just a couple of examples on economic, social and environmental sustainability. So if you look at economic sustainability a little bit unconventionally, Ireland is a leader certainly in terms of the quality and the reputation we have globally. The trusted food abroad and at home. It's one of the goals of Food Vision 2030 as well. But that's largely based on Origin Green, which is part of Port Via, which has done a phenomenal job at marketing Ireland's food. But this helps to show at least on one indicator, ammonia in agriculture, which I know everybody here knows the effects of. Origin Green might have been marketing well, but the question as to whether or not they've been monitoring and enforcing any kind of sustainability is really questionable. And so my point is here that the roadmap that's guiding Food Vision 20 may need to be updated if we are to achieve the targets we want to achieve, and to think about it more broadly. Environmental sustainability, I'm not going to dwell on this either, but just a couple of points that are the organic crop area that Ireland is aiming to achieve by 2030 is a 5.5-fold increase on where we are today. So it's pretty ambitious in that sense. On the other hand, Ireland ranks 4th to last in the EU, and this is really driven by the farm to fork goals. So how we implement this is going to be critical, and I would argue that policies need to be stimulating demand, and that there's a role for the private sector there as well, especially the retailers, which hopefully we can get to later. The last point is about social sustainability. So I'll try to plow through this as quickly as possible, but do I have time to ask another question?
You really do, because I'm so dazed and confused after my day. I was off by an hour. I thought it was 5 o'clock. As you were.
It's good strategy, actually. It's good strategy. It's good.
Okay, so in terms of social sustainability, this is, as I said, it's the most nebulous of concepts, and so I'm really curious to hear what the people in this room, the panel, and everybody here thinks about what this means. And so, if I can just build off what Tim, I don't know who said in the previous session. You mentioned 70 years ago or 60 years ago there was much more. There was an incredible sense of community, and that today the agriculture that's happening, there's much less labour, in fact. So that was one immediate connection between, or even indirect connection between social cohesion and employment. But I would wonder, and maybe you can come in at some point to let us know, if there were any other direct effects on the environment specifically of social cohesion. Because currently when we think, or when we talk about social sustainability, it ends up being about public health and nutrition, which is really, really important, obviously. But there's a lot more to social sustainability. So does anybody want to volunteer what comes to mind when they think about social sustainability in the context of food?
Food production.
Can I comment on that? So the social sustainability piece would be important to me, I suppose. I know you probably look at me, big dairy farmer, but my father's from North Roscommon, come from a small suckyard, and small land commission place, we're all reared in it. And I still have an uncle down there who's now an organic farmer. But the worry I'd have is I see the social sustainability of that area being sucked out of it because the loss of people in the area. And I look at towns like Elphin and Tulsk, Ballygar, local pubs, local marts, and I see over my lifetime, like I'm 40 now, like I'm going down there since I was a child. I just see the busyness being sucked out of the town. And for me, that's the social sustainability. And what's driving that? What's the important factor? It's people. But I suppose you want to put, in terms of from a farm animal point, it's the suckler cow. She's she mightn't be a hugely efficient economic unit, but she drove a lot of commerce and kept a lot of people busy and in jobs in those areas. And that's, the big one for me in terms of social sustainability.
Do you want to maybe respond to that, Thomas? I'd say you do have interest in some common views and
from my own perspective, social sustainability, first of all, we can't be sustainable anymore. We need to be regenerative because we can't sustain the situation we're in because we're in a big trouble. For me, the difference is between food security and food sovereignty. So when we talk about agriculture, we talk generally about agribusiness, we talk about conventional agriculture. That's a commodity-based system that's driven on exports. You are totally dependent socially and nationally on either having the money, being able to borrow the money under food security to either buy the food to bring into the country or buy the raw inputs and end up going up to produce your food in the system. I don't believe that there can be social sustainability in the long run with that because you're always dependent rather than independent as a community and as a farmer. Food sovereignty is a much wider conversation. It's about the ownership of the land itself, the commons, the water, understanding the soil. It's about the genetic diversity of the plants. It's about the knowledge and the information within the community to turn around and ensure that we can produce food into the future and do it in such a way that doesn't degrade our environment. So for me, that's what social sustainability is. But like I say, being sustainable anymore isn't good enough. We need to reimagine new ways of doing things so we're better than just being sustainable.
Just maybe you'd have a cut at this, Brian. You mentioned we can't be just be sustainable, we need to be regenerative. It's a word that's bandied around to that, but it does kind of have a meaning. Would you just have a shot at seeing?
Yeah, I think, well, when I think of regenerative, I think of building soil, so not degrading it or leaving it in a worse state than when you arrived at it. So, yeah, for me, in organics, and it's about, and I suppose this is your job in a nutshell. I say, so how do we leave the soil in a better way while growing crops in it, you know, and or raise animals on it. So like, what systems we have to do? How do we modify our systems? How do we work our systems to do that? You know?
That's what my like. As people can kind of roll their eyes when they hear regenerative. I would say like that the soil is more fertile after agriculture. There's more biodiversity. The water is cleaner running off this land. Yeah, rather than if going the opposite way. Apologies. Was that enough for you? Because you weren't quite finished yet.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we did talk about potentially plant-based diets as well, so this might be relevant. I'll write up on that.
Do.
Okay, so I am.
There you go.
Thank you. Put the question in a different way to the audience to see if I can get a response as well at some point. So start thinking about it. But as I said, nutrition and public health tends to be linked mostly with social sustainability, and so what we're looking at here is one way of considering maybe a systems, the interactions. So rather than looking, a lot of the conversation when we're talking about sustainable diets, and even the word sustainable, so you're using it in the sense that it needs to be long term. In other senses, it's that it's environmentally friendly or that it's nourishing people. So there's some, there's confusion around the term, but if we're thinking of linking nutrition and social sustainability, we might look at what we're growing and how we're growing it. So in Ireland, this represents land that is not used by livestock, so it's only a small portion of the land, but you can immediately see the lack of diversity in the production in Ireland. And this is Harvard's recommended dietary intake, which is riddled with flaws as well. But again, it's a contrast to show what's being produced versus what we might need. But the problem is that, in my opinion, that when we're talking about sustainable or healthy diets, we're talking about plant-based diets, which I think, first of all, in terms of health and nutrition outcomes, if that's what we're looking at, it's about ultra-processed foods. And that's not nourishing people. It's not nourishing the planet. Thankfully, we have the studies coming out now to demonstrate that the effect from processing to packaging environmentally as well of these ultra-processed foods are worse than any other whole foods. So it's not rocket science, and it doesn't take the academic studies really to know that it's healthier and better environmentally to eat something from down the road. But we need the evidence, I suppose, for the policymakers. And a challenge I've come across with the concepts of justice, food justice, climate justice, food sovereignty is how to translate that into actionable evidence for decision makers who are up against a whole variety of issues. But I think if we are talking about plant-based diets, we need to also then consider the social sustainability and the environmental sustainability of livestock, for example, production. And really the key is to move away from the divisive conversation that's happening, especially it has been happening in Ireland. So that's all I think I need to say for now, leaving it on a cheesy quote about listening from David Nabarro, who won the World Food Prize and who's been a real champion in collective action. So
one of the questions I was thinking, and it's maybe for Thomas and Brian, am I right in saying about new entrants to farming? You probably have a disruptive way of thinking, and I mean that in the most positive sense. You're looking at things differently. I'd be interested in you maybe sketching out your vision of food production in Ireland, and then maybe the panel can respond because I suppose one of the things I think about a bit is the world is very globalised now. There's huge intercontinental trade, and what you're seeing happening is we're focusing production in areas that are most climatically suitable for it. You know, and Ireland obviously has an advantage in grass growing. I'm up for being contested on that or whatever. And so it's moving towards, you know, dairy production or livestock production to a lesser extent. But that also creates kind of vulnerabilities, you know, when you get trade shocks or stuff like COVID. So I'm thinking about trying to get the balance between using our natural advantages and also having that sovereignty or that resilience, Thomas, that maybe you're talking about. So I'm interested in you sketching out maybe an alternative food system. I know that's a huge ask, so you can keep it brief, but
well, actually, with Talamh Beo, we've already been working on it, and we have a local policy framework, and it's about producing local food. Because again, like, so I did a talk there a good few years about getting oil out of our food system. Again, we're very dependent on the energy we use in our agricultural systems to turn around and fuel how we grow stuff. If we go back to nature and photosynthesis, like I said, plant-based food systems, all the systems are plant-based, because whether you have an animal on the land afterwards or not, everything starts with the plant and photosynthesis and the biology underneath it. But then that's built on the diversity of the ecology within an environment. What we've done over the last 100 years especially, it's become agribusiness, it's become chemical and industrial agriculture. So now when we think about agriculture, we don't think about the natural environment and the surplus that comes off it. We think of going out into the environment, clearing it, leveling it, and imposing our will on it. So that's one plant, one crop, intensification rather than diversification. But also, if we start diversifying what's happening on the farm and bringing more people onto the farm, we can create better livelihoods, and then people are more connected with the land. One of the reasons I became a farmer is I read a paper years ago that every cell in your body replaces itself every 8 or 9 years, and I realised to be a better Kerry man I needed to be eating the land from Kerry. because we had tens of thousands of cultures all over the world with independent perspectives of the environment they lived in, but their individual environments were built from the bedrock and the ecology and community that developed around it. Now we have a monoculture just like in our agriculture across the society, so we need to diversify that. So going back to nature, there's loads of solutions there. Since time began, the planet has been photosynthesizing. There's been billions and millions of years of evolution that led to a point. 100 years ago we got very, very distracted. We went down the road of debt and destruction. Like, I'm an organic farmer. 15 years ago we took over the farm. I didn't know much about farming. I spent a bit of time on my grandfather's farm, but I realised that first thing we did was become certified organic, for the simple fact that anything with debt at the end of it, insecticides, herbicides, fungicides, all of these things, they break the web of life, and the web of life then creates bounty. So if we can bring the knowledge and the information and how to preserve and hold that in the future generations, and that's with the seeds and with the people and the knowledge, then that's the future of food.
Thanks, Thomas. One thing both of you do, I think, is you sell local produce locally and direct, and there's a real advantage in that if you can manage it, and it's no small thing to manage everything that goes with it, the marketing. But Ireland, I think, historically has always given low populations produced a food surplus. You know, we produce more food than we need to eat ourselves. And, you know, I was in California last summer and I saw the same there now. Like, it's a very intensive ag system, but, you know, they are producing 15 or 20% of America's food there for an increasingly globally urbanized population. So Ireland will, Thomas, I suppose, focused on the kind of farm level. Brian, you know, what are your thoughts on a bigger picture of food production in Ireland, given not everyone's going to sell locally and we probably will?
Yeah, but I think there's huge potential still. There's still a huge growth. I mean, the retail sales of food produce in Ireland last year, I think, was 1.65 billion. So that's, and about, of the 500 odd million at Farmgate that was produced in Ireland, 150 million of that was exported. So you've got about 350 million in Farmgate production in Ireland of a 1.65 billion industry. So there's massive potential there for Irish horticulture to get more of a foothold of that. The problem we have is, I think, you know, as you said, the structure that has kind of been there up until now is you farm 1 or 2 crops, you do that on scale, you do your chemical application, but unfortunately it's been pinching people more and more and more, to the point where we've just completely consolidated the horticulture industry. So, like, my vision of how things should go, number one, like people like Tomas and myself, we need to earn a living and we need to be supported. This is why we've decided to directly sell. I think it's easier when you're directly interfacing with your customers. You can have a more positive impact because you're people want to meet the person producing the food. Number one, there's a massive disconnect now with the way people buy their food. They don't see or meet the producers. It's supermarkets, but I don't necessarily think, we're never going to change that system. I don't think the supermarket system is going to change. I don't think we're going to revolutionise that system. There's not going to be 100 Cork Roof Top Farm retailer systems around the Ireland.
There should be.
Yeah, but it won't happen. I don't have the power. I'm not going to take on a Duns or a Super Values or anything like that. But I think we can definitely have influence on those multiples through the right thing. They're already signing up that they want, the farmers to have, negative or neutral targets of CO2 emissions. All the big multiples, the Tesco's, the Dunses, all them, they're already signing up to these targets. They haven't really explained how they're getting the producers on board with those targets. So in my vision would be a much more decentralized system of production. So where you'd have more smaller silos of producers closer to the localities, producing a wider variety of produce. We're in an incredible climate to produce food. And I mean, currently I think the figures, there's 568 hectares of organic production in Ireland. It's teeny tiny. When you say we need to multiply it by 5, I'd say we could multiply that by 10, 20, I don't think it's an unambitious target. I think it needs to go further. And at a quicker rate. It's getting the people to do it, because people are leaving in their droves. People who've been in the industry for 20, 30, 40 years just can't make a living by doing it the way they've always done it. But it's how do we encourage them back with maybe a system similar to how we're doing it, where we grow locally, we sell into our community, and how can we get the bigger supermarkets then to get on board and supporting that kind of system.
Thanks, Brian. You might have a response to that. Am I right in saying your family straddles farming and retailing?
Correct, yeah. So, not bad enough from a big dairy farm in family origin. I also involved me there. My brother and my father are involved, yeah. So I was the black sheep that went into the cow business. But I suppose, Ray, the two, like Thomas and Brian, what they're saying, like there's a lot of what they're saying. I meet a lot of people that want that. I meet a huge amount of people. I meet a lot of our people that want that. But I have to, suppose, kind of bring it back to where we are now, right? So last week I was in the JOC, the Joint Oireachtas Committee, on challenges facing the horticulture sector, and I had 2 horticulture growers with me. We were discussing their challenges in terms of labour and viability, and we're also discussing the strategy document from the Minister. One of the big challenges we see, and you're right to call out some of the retailers, most of the food bought in Ireland, the vast majority is bought at retail level, the big ones. And then we have the discounters. So you have the main 4, Tesco, Dunnes, Super Value, and then you have the 2 discounters. The challenge hort growers in particular are facing now is the discount and the advent of price wars and the pressure that comes on. That we see our people very, very vulnerable. So there would be specialist horticulture growers operating at a fairly significant scale. That when we see a price war, while the retailer might say, well, it's not impacting what we're paying for the product, it will impact it down the line. It eventually lands back. And what it does is 2 things. It impacts on the price that the retailer is willing to give for the product next time round, but it also impacts the perceived value of the customer. So they get used to a bag of carrots for 19 cents. That's a huge challenge. So in terms of that, and when you're dealing with retail as well, they want security of supply and they want scale. And they have driven the sector. Now, we reckon latest stats would show there's about 160 specialist hort growers in the country supplying that large retail market. Our latest figures would suggest it's about 100. Yeah. We've one broccoli grower in the country that's supplying the multiples. He's based in Kildare. He left half his crop on the ground last year because he couldn't get staff. And then when he couldn't get the product, that product's brought into Spain. Like, they are the challenges we're facing, I suppose. And the message we'd always bring is that at government level, because in fact, like, whether like my day job with IFA is to advocate for farmers at government level, at policy level, is that in order to to hit the strategy that's there. And I think the government, like you'd agree, Brian, the government strategy is good.
Yeah.
It's positive, it's good. It needs people though, and you're right outside what you said there. They need to arrest the decline we're seeing now. And just one point on the organic business as well. And I do see a lot of opportunity in organics, right? I do. And I've never seen the government, there's massive push in the government for it. And Sinead's quite right, 5.5-fold target in terms of increase. But the challenge is the market. Sinead mentioned it. Challenge is the market. And from a dairy farmer's perspective, if I was to be an organic dairy farmer today, I would get less money from my milk per litre than I would, you know. So I'm a conventional dairy farmer. If I was organic, I'd be getting less money per litre. That is no way to encourage someone into it.
That's a critical point. I was at the Talamh Beo conference last year, and there was a couple of alternative organic dairy farmers, and there was one conventional dairy farmer who was interested in biodiversity. So the three of them were on stage, and the organic lads were kind of saying, "Yeah, look, I'm getting maybe it was around 55 cents at the time." They came off the stage, and the conventional guy didn't say much. But he came off the stage. The conventional guy said to me, "He said I didn't have it in me to say that I'm making 65 at the moment." You know, and so because there is a drawback to going organic, and I know this is huge advantages the lads will discuss as well.
Ask just on the on the pricing situation and the devaluing of products. Like the IFA, myself and Ray were in with them last year, and we were speaking about when say a retailer is selling something at which is basically an immoral price.
Below cost, So how below cost,
How has progress been going in terms of negotiating with government on bringing in legislation against that kind of...
And just before you answer that, Fred,
good question.
There has to be common ground there between the ENGOs and the IFA and below cost selling. It's like nobody wants it.
So the area, we be absolutely crystal clear that we would want and we seek in a ban on below cost selling. And now there's a food ombudsman, which we had a consumer and competition authority, but no teeth regarding protecting the primary producer. So now we have a food ombudsman. The government is absolutely resistant in introducing the ban on below cost selling, because what they say, it's going to lead to increased food waste, because if you come on short dated food, it doesn't allow them discounted to get out the door. That's what they're saying. So, and we came on the JLC as well, and you're dead right, Ray. It's common ground among a lot of people in terms of it. So is there we put an amendment in there as well in terms of trying to define what unsustainable discounting could look like, and we'll see how it goes.
Can I just come in for a second there? It's important to understand how the question has been framed. So at the moment, like the way we run our agriculture, the knowledge and information we're given through the institutions and through education and the government bodies is all based around commodity and export, industrial and chemical agriculture. There isn't a wider conversation out there. That legislation has been framed pretty much by the PLCs, beef barons and supermarkets. So our whole food system is based on commodity and economic units. Farmers are reduced simply to being economic units. The farmer used to be a primary producer of produce on the farm. They sold it into the community or onto a processor. Now the farmer is swallowed up into the factory, because where he used to use his knowledge and information, his landscape, all the biology, all the carbon, everything that was built there by generations to produce food, now all that has been cleared because of industrial agriculture, and he's dependent on the inputs, whether that's soluble fertilizers or minerals, because the biological system is broken. So when we're looking at AgriVision 2030 and we're looking at Borbia and Chagas and all these, you must understand their mindset is in the status quo. They don't understand that there are other alternatives. And we should, one of the things Talamh Beo wants is an agrochemical-free Ireland, because if we're going to have effective biological and ecological systems that can produce good quality food, give farmers a local livelihood, and have people healthy at the end of it, we need to ensure that that food is coming from locally within Ireland.
That's a great place to bring you in, Sam. Is there a definition you use for agrochemical? Would it include NPK?
See, nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, very good. But when they come in natural forms that biology is using, locking them up and feeding to the plant, that's one thing. When they come as a soluble salt that's put in the ground that the plant can't absorb, and then all these systems interfere with the biological process that would unlock the minerals in the first place, what we've done is broken the digestion of the earth and the soil. Nutrients are cycled all the time. We'll be cycled back ourselves. We've broken the biological systems that used to cycle those nutrients, and we've done it through industrial and chemical agriculture.
Okay, thanks, Sam. You can take a bit of time to respond to this, Sam, because clearly Sam will be known in Ireland as a very progressive voice amongst tillage farmers, but you still very much are involved in conventional tillage at some level. So,
if you want to bring people with you, you have to turn your back on the orchestra, or if you want to conduct whatever. But one thing I'd like to say first is sometimes I get described as a regenerative farmer, and I don't like using the term because it is starting to mean all things to all people, and you can't define it. Like it can come in like at the bare minimum. You put in a cover crop, you're a regenerative farmer. You have some other guy down the other end that's doing no-till organic farming, like he's doing the impossible, and he's a regenerative farmer. So like both these people are then the same in the eyes of a policymaker. So who is it? So it's a term I tend to shy away from. It's becoming like the new sustainability word, like you know.
What do you prefer?
Me, I use farmer, conservation ag, because conservation ag is defined by the Food and Agriculture Organisation as minimum soil disturbance, cover crops, rotation and retention of crop residues. That's kind of what we're practicing. The other aspect of that is to carry out that kind of farming, I don't have to sign up to anything. So if I sign up to be an organic farmer, I'm locked into 2 year where my land has been cleansed of pesticides, and then I'm now committed to being an organic farmer. Current type of farming I'm doing, I can twist and turn as conditions require me to do. I have a lot of freedom, and the only person that I'm will be say beholden to is myself as a farmer. I have great freedom there. You know, like, so that's one thing to do. Just to pick up on your comment, like as farmers being sucked into that factory system, I'm dealing with farmers mostly the eastern side of the Shannon, but from Antrim to Cork. I'm not seeing that happening. I'm seeing an increasing number of farmers taking back control of their farms. What they're doing, I think we went through a couple of decades where all the problems on the farm were the solutions were outside the farm gate, in that like it was someone else's fault that the farm was in the current situation, found itself in the spiral of debt, whatever. And then you now see a generation of farmers coming like, hang on a second, I can actually turn this around. And it's farmers taking back the sovereignty of the farms. They're saying, right, forget about what's happening outside the farm gate. What can I control? They can control their inputs. They can control, you know, they can't control the price of what they're getting for their produce because someone else sets that, because most of us are a commodity system. But they can control how they can grow it, and they can control the conditions that they're growing it in.
I 100% agree with you. Yeah. Like the way we see it is that what you need to do is, it's the easiest thing at the moment to tell farmers reduce their inputs, because they're on an economic treadmill and they have so many externalities between bank loans and investment and all that they're caught into a system. So if you can take some of the economic and financial pressure off them by reducing the inputs that are going into the farm, then you're making a big difference.
Like, another thing there I would say is like, you talk about state advisory and things like that. They are now playing catch up with the leaders of, definitely in the arable systems, what was conservation agriculture. I would actually, if I was going to use the term regenerative, I would use it on the livestock side of things, because there isn't such a thing as conservation agriculture for livestock farmers.
No, that's right.
So that's where regenerative actually fits for me, because you need livestock in that system to be really regenerative. They're playing catch up with us now, but we won't miss our state advisory bodies until they're gone. So look after them, give them a little bit of respect. They have a very tough job. Their job is, they're not worried about the students, as it were, at the top of the class that are going, we take this in a leaving cert comparison. There's a group of farmers and they can get like 550, 600 points if they're the leaving cert in farming. They can get that no problem. They just turn up in the morning, write the exam. Great. They're doctors of agriculture now. But there's a group of people down the back that they have a passion for farming, or maybe they wound up with a farm, I don't know, they're farming. And they are struggling a little bit. And Chagris is like the teacher, needs to go down the back and bring those people forward. And It's just to get them a good leaving cert, that they can come out the other end of the system in good stead. Of course, the thing is, you never really leave the system of farming unless you quit in moments to do that. But a lot of criticism has come to the state advisory bodies from the people at the top of the class saying, you're not doing it for us. You're not doing the research that we need. But the truth is, those people don't need the research. They're just going to go and do it anyway.
I think it's more of a concept. So you go to agricultural college and you're in there and you're conditioned again in industrial and chemical agriculture. Nature, biodiversity, this stuff is only the arse end of it. I'll give you an example. I do farm walks for students from MTU, fourth year agricultural students. 42 of them appear out in a bus to me. First question I always ask them is, how many of you consume the food that comes off your own farm? 4 out of 40 of them will put their hands up. The rest of them, and the thing is, you can't blame them, that's what they know, what they experience. But if our institutions and the taxpayers' money that's going into educating our farmers into the future is being used in such a very narrow mindset of what agriculture represents, which isn't agriculture, it's agribusiness.
Can I interrupt you there? If you've gone to college to learn a syllabus, you haven't gone to a very good college. College is not meant to teach you that. You're not meant to go to college and learn a syllabus. This is how you do things. We do that that's what you do in Montessori. This is how you play with mud.
But you need multiples of experiences in order to come to a
What
point.
you go to college to learn is you learn how to analyse information.
I might bring Brian in there, and what I might do then is, Sinead, you've probably got a lot going in your head about what's been said so far, so I would say great pleasure to hand it over this thing to you for a while, and then I'd say there's a good couple of questions in the audience as well, and and I'll give plenty of time to summarise thoughts as well. So Brian,
so first of all, Thomas, I disagree with you on the use of the term chemical industrial agriculture, which you won't be surprised at, I suppose. Comes with what many would deem a conventional farming system, but even when I say conventional, I wince a bit, because I suppose farming, there's a bit of a pivot happening on conventional farms at the minute, which is quite positive. But I'd say it's just chemical and industrial. Listen, I'm farming a lot of cows. I'm well above average. I'm not an industrial farmer. I'm just not. I've been to a feedlot in California when there was maybe 60 or 70 or 80,000 cattle sitting in a feedlot in their own dirt. That's an industrial unit where they're shipping in all the feed. We strive to grow as much feed on our farm for our cows as we can. Yeah, we import some grain to maintain milk production in the summer months and for calves, but we grow the vast majority of feed our cows. We grow about 3.5 tonne of grass and about 750 kilograms of silage. That's where our cows eat in a year in terms of dry matter. So, and then the chemical piece, I suppose, I know where you're coming from, but we do use chemicals on our farm, but we use it sparingly because we have to use it sparingly now. If I want to spray, like Sam, if I want to spray, I have to go and I have to buy the product, it's registered, I have to do a spraying course, I have to follow the Sustainable Use Directive. If you want to buy a can of Roundup for the patio, you can go down to the filling station and throw it into the basket beside the tomatoes. Farmers can't do that. We're highly regulated, and we're moving in a direction, and it mightn't be fast enough for a lot of people, but you have to remember two things when you talk about agriculture and how it's moving is, we have a serious age profile issue in agriculture in Ireland. We have a serious succession issue in agriculture in Ireland, and if there's one thing that I would say that would move us quicker in the right direction, because we do need to move in the right direction, and we need to address some serious issues we have. We need to accelerate and support succession on farm, because there's nothing like new blood to change a system on a farm, and there's nothing like new blood with a bit of pressure on them to perform to move the dial quickly. So that's just in terms of, I'd say at the end that.
I would just say succession, Brian. I'd say new entrants.
Exactly. And that's what I mean. Yeah. And I suppose I would call myself a new entrant, because the reason I left the farm, and I suppose this is important, by the way, the reason I left the system of farming I was doing, because I loved it. I loved tillage farming, I loved growing crops, and I loved raising beef cattle. But it didn't love me. That's the way I describe it. And I was at it at a fairly good scale now, right? I could turn over a good few quid at it. But I wasn't making any money. My decision to enter dairying was driven solely by my economic need. I was recently married, I had a child on the way, and I wanted to stay full-time farmer. That was genuine, and dairying provided me with an opportunity or a pathway with the type of land I farm to secure my future in that sector.
It's one thing, we've talked about it before, dairying gets a lot of flack in Ireland, all of my mother's family are dairy farmers. You have to take your hat off to it and say it's caused significant environmental issues, that you'd accept that. But it's actually provided, it's one of the first farm systems in Ireland to provide a good quality of living. And the co-op system has to be lauded as well. It's not the way the beef system is. So I think people need to acknowledge that. We talked about the three stews of sustainability. I don't think it's environmentally sustainable at the moment. But you might disagree with socially sustainable. But I spend a lot of time in the west of Ireland.
Yeah.
I see dairying communities to be more socially sustainable than I do sheep or beef farms in the west of Ireland. I don't know, Thomas, that's where you live as well. But I really do. There's a standard of living can be held there. There's a rationale for kids to take on the farm that doesn't exist in a lot of places here in the west.
And obviously another driver behind that was the loss in income I was sustaining from cap reform. Cap reform impacted me particularly badly, and if it had stayed the way it was, I'd probably still be a dairy farmer. But it didn't. I was hit with convergence and other reduction, and that was the direction of travel, and that's fine. But I had to make an adjustment, and that adjustment was the best thing for me. And just in terms of the Teagasc piece, and I'm glad Sam defended it, and I suppose as a board member I'm going to defend it as, but as a farmer who's used the service and used it a lot and continues to use it, I think we're lucky to have it. It has its faults, Thomas. I would be the first to put my hand up and say it has its faults. It does. But if you travel around the world, which many of you have, you look at where research is driven from. Most research is private industry funded, which will, if it does not achieve the outcome we'll set out, that research will not be found. Teagasc, in fairness, both good and bad, it will always, publish that research. I suppose bits of research they've done now, which is a service to the state in particular, is the new survey on degraded peatlands in terms of what is actually drained and what's not drained, and that'll impact the EPA targets. The one thing I say about dairying and Teagasc is, the one thing Teagasc are guilty, and Moore Park in particular was guilty around dairy, it was too successful. Back you up. Develop the model for farmers when very few in the country were as focused on the environment as we should have been, be it water quality and emissions in particular. Develop the model for farmers that made money, and farmers adopted the model, adapted to their farm, and it did a good job for them.
I think a bit more responsibility needs to be taken there, Brian.
I agree.
Where everyone's getting out about Charlie McConnell in recent days that he's going to shut down farms, and we knew the problems were coming since 2012, 2013, and the industry didn't respond, and the advisory did, or responded too late, and now we're looking at hard cuts because of it. Anyway, we better get on to
one single point. I'm at one point I'm really excited in terms of where Teagasc are going. If we looked at the program in Teagasc called the Walsh Scholarship, and that means that it's a postgrad, but we're now getting international students. We're getting Indians, Brazilians, we're getting people from all over Eastern Europe, and we're bringing in this massive talent and diversity into Teagasc, and they're getting qualified and they're staying here, and that's only a bonus.
Sniz.
So we have another hour, yeah?
We we'll wrap. You can take us away. We're good with time anyway, but I don't want to keep everyone.
No. I mean, there is a lot. Most of the things I wouldn't fundamentally disagree with, but I'm going to put another question to the audience. I'm not going to ask anyone to speak given my success earlier, but I will ask for a raise of hands. So how many of us in the room feel very happy with the current state of the Irish food system? Okay. Anybody just feel happy about it? Jesus. Okay. Anybody feel sad about it? Okay, very sad? Okay, that's really interesting. It's a bit depressing that nobody feels happy about the food system here. So, I think this has been mentioned on the panel already, and from the integration of the research institutions, Teagasc and other.
Not happy about the food system.
Do we still be open to roast? So objectively speaking, it's really interesting that nobody in this room would be even happy with the food system, because actually, in my opinion, but also objectively on a number of indicators, Ireland does rank really highly in terms of the sustainability and the security of our food systems. Personally, I see that as well, and I see a huge amount of potential. There's so much hope in this country. It's such a unique position where we have a very recent history compared to other higher income countries of decolonization, where we're finding our identity in terms of food in the last 15, 20 years again. where we're small enough that everybody knows everybody. So there is a real potential for citizens and community empowerment, and it's happening everywhere. And I think really what Ray and Home Tree does is one really good example of that, because it's bringing all the different sectors together. So there's lots of things that are going awry, and there's one awry in the system that we need to focus on. But I think on several areas we're in a really good space, and we're going in the right direction. Well, what I find is missing from the conversation still, and I think it's due to the complexities, is the power dynamics that we have in our system. And to hear you, Brian, say it's not something I'm going to take on the supermarkets.
Yeah.
But
Undermine
we're
it,
not going to go against.
No,
we have to go with them.
But the sense is, so we're talking about new entrants here. The sense is that you're up against this, and you spoke about the Ombudsman. So that Office of Unfair Trading Practices is being launched by Irish government in a department which, as most departments, hasn't got a huge amount of capacity. And it's there partially to try and balance these imbalances we have between retailers and suppliers and farmers. But you said the market is the problem. The market is not the problem. The market is nothing. The market exists based on what we make it to be. So what I don't understand is why we don't place more of the burden on the retailers and on the large agribusiness. And we talk about them being innovative and leading and government stifling them. But they're the least innovative that I can see. They're the most obscure. The reason we have to have an unfair trading practices office is to gather data that ultimately will be lacking because the private sector refuses to share their data, their marketing data. As a first step, there's no leadership from the private sector there. The best we get are these junk food alternatives. It's hijacking the sustainable diets to make burgers and ice cream and some things that are helping no one. So I don't understand when we're talking about these things why that is so absent from the conversation. And retailers through refrigeration, for example, have seen a 300% increase in their greenhouse gas emissions since 1990. Well, we're talking about production. Most of this panel, we've talked about production, whether it's regenerative or organic or the different strands. But if we take a systems approach and we look at where the problems are, I think responsibility really needs to be taken a lot more by the private sector here. And also in terms of a comment that, this office doesn't have much teeth. The Irish government is also bound by the strictures of regional and global laws. So the Irish government can't come in and just tell the private sector, you have to open your data. You have to give fair prices. So really, if we want real change, there has to be better leadership, I would say, by the private sector. And I don't know why that doesn't come in.
What's the incentive for them to do that?
So it is a really good question. And because this is not an academic space or, let's call it a safe space, my first thing will be to say that if you're not psychopathic, why would you not want to be investing in sustainable food systems? There's nobody working in agribusiness that doesn't have family, that doesn't probably have future generations. Why would you, if you're not psychopathic, choose to make an extra 200 million rather than lose 200 million on produced good food? So, that's what in the real world, regulation does need to come in. And you were talking about regulation and chemical use, but that regulation of the chemical use is set within this market system where we don't consider regulation for environment or regulation for social cohesion. We only consider for pure health and safety risks. So I think regulation has to be the incentive, and then consumer demand. But
I think it's funny. I wonder a lot of time what really drives things. Is it the consumer drives the retailer, or is it the retailer drives the consumer? I think personally, it's the retailer drives the consumer.
It is, and the more.
But let's look at now. Listen, Neil Richmond now decided to call in the retailers because he said that inflation was dropping, and he went into the retailers. You have to drop your price, and there wasn't a conversation about how that price would land back in the farm gate. What we're seeing now already, we're seeing Lidl and Aldi straight away discounting fresh milk, knocking 10 cent a litre off own brand milk. And own brand milk, that's going to land on farmers' gates. There's only 1,700, less than 1,700 fresh milk producers in the country, and they supply the entire about 16,500 dairy farmers. I'm what they call a creamy milk, so I'm in the food ingredient space. There's about 1,700 dairy farmers in the country supplying your liquid milk, and we're losing them year on year, right? I talk about food security. That to me, liquid milk is an imminent threat in our terms. We have an agency called the NMA, whose the only sole purpose is to make sure we're not going to run out of milk. But they're saying, lads, we can't keep sustaining the losses. But we see Lidl and Aldi, 10 cent a litre of own brand milk, and the others will follow. Because consumers will be drawn to that. Consumers love cheap milk. They love own branded milk. And, you know, I like, from a farmer point of view in terms of taking on the retail or whatever, we've gone into Lidl and Aldi. Lidl took me and the president to court for, you know, definite, because we made comments around the whole use of fake brands. They threw the law at us, right? And we'll, like, they can be taken on, there's no doubt about it. But if the consumer goes in and they buy the cheap milk, that'll drive retailer behaviour as well, you know?
I think that, to be honest, over the years, most of the consumers I met actually genuinely, like a lot of the farmers, want to do the best for their environment and want to buy the best food. So there's a lot of pressure comes on the supermarkets. But instead of actually solving the problem, they pump millions and millions and millions into PR, which creates an illusion of having fixed it without actually having solved the underlying problems.
There's actually research to show that agribusiness, and it's starting to emerge. So one of the indicators we use to say they're super innovative and government stifles and government has no ideas, and first of all, government doesn't have the same investment because we've devolved it to private sector, but actually the vast majority, it seems, of agribusiness R&D, research and development, goes into marketing and PR. So there's nothing new for society that's coming out of this research, even though they won't share it anyway. So really, you know, I think a lot of the narrative needs to be questioned around the value of these huge institutions and as art or government's role in them.
So is there any sort of difference between the word agribusiness? I don't know. Is there a definition and things like the co-op structure where it functions like a large multinational, but ultimately the benefits go back to its membership.
There's actually quite a big difference. A cooperative is built and the profit, this excess profit comes back into the community and back into the farmers and the people engaged in it. The way the system we have at the moment is the food system designed about extracting the profits out of the community to external shareholders. So that to me is agribusiness,
built on a cooperative system,
which became PLCs and the priority shifted.
Maybe Kerry now.
Okay, well, I know them. I know you're dead right. You're dead right. You can only work with the models, you know.
And if you look at, and to be honest, if you look at the Kerry model, these farmers down there are really pissed off.
Yeah.
You've got a co-op and a PLC fighting. If the co-op board went and protested because they weren't getting fair play. Now, I'm a member of a co-op, Lakelands in the northwest, and our milk price is not great at the minute because they emptied the cash drawer last year, and like it is a co-op. But I think you're right in saying, like, I'd look as my co-op, I'd look at what happened with Kerry, and a lot of people made a lot of money off that. And but there's farmers there now being badly served with that relationship, and I think that's a warning for us, Thomas.
Well,
you're right now.
Kerry Group is an ingredients company now. Essentially, they buy. So what Kerry Group knows, they go around the world and they have their farming side of it, the co-op that's still kind of there. But their main business is actually acquisitions. They go in and they buy up small local producers, small factories. They strip the assets, they consume the brand, and then they have thousands and thousands and thousands of brands all under their own name. So when you as a customer or consumer walk into a supermarket, there's so many layers of corporations lying behind where your food is coming from. It's very hard for people to actually be able to make straightforward choices.
Thanks, Thomas. I better throw a couple of questions out because it is actually starting to get late. Kind of one game.
I'm Ryan Mitchell, I've been chairman with IIP.
Oh, how's that?
The discussion group, part of the discussion group, so I'm with Brian New Zealand advisor. So yeah, I've been very much in the environmental system. I'm now looking at return ag with my brothers separately, and by saying there's so many a broad picture, that's good. If how you do the adjacent step, you don't go from what we could do. We do what can you do today. That's basic farming now. And it is covered again ag and wine. Yeah. It allows it to improve in the soil, and that is the purpose of it. Now, on that, and the other part of that's going up in farming now is reducing nitrates. And this went into urea in Texas. Danu, which is corn break.
You were talking in English, yeah.
6 tillage, 6 livestock, over 5 years, he reduced their nitrogen by 35%. That is way beyond anything the Travis has done. On your side to reduce one better, you know it.
Yeah. But what you should add to the 35% reduction is no reduction in output.
Yeah.
In output. That's
just going to add that. No reduction in output. Now, on the open days for that, there were 3 people that came down from ordinary A. No one tagged us, oh no.
there was. And the second day,
second day, right?
as
On the first day,
I know Nigel actually.
Came down, there was no one from on there. There was people came from other sectors. No. But listen the fact that we didn't tag us. Now, and even with that, we talk about the education system. Mike Welch below Waterford, he's one of the teachers, tutors sitting inside and outside there. Farm up his farm. For the last 3 years, he has been reducing milk with no inputs, no NPK. Simply by staying within his own system, using it intelligently in the soil. No one from Travis turned up. That is a silo within Travis. I grant everything that Travis got. They are excellent technical people. But for me, they are here. They're looking at cause and effect. Whereas farming as a society is a complex adaptive system. You need things in a complex adaptive system. You do multiple trials to see what works. Travis was a long line. And on the open day last week, it had one showing nitrogen comes from the air, from fertilizer, and from the soil. All the trials have been done on the fertilizer. If nitrogen is in the air at 8%, why are we not looking at that? If it's in the soil, where is it in the soil? What's the good soil? What's the bad soil? These are facts not done because.
To be fair,
I really good.
they've gone like dairy farmers are pretty much all tuned into the clover route. I know it's not going to save everything, but they've got heavily into clover, so they are getting that nitrogen out. One thing that came out of what you said, Northern Ireland did a soil sampling test on every field on every farm, and they gave the data straight back to the farmers. I'd love to see that something that again like common cause between environmental groups and farmers, so farmers understand their farms better. I'd love to see some lobby.
If you pardon the pun, see China's return to its roots, which was a soil survey.
That's why I have the vote.
Yeah.
This man over here, I will get around, but let's keep him questiony, snappy. Thanks, man.
I'm a beef farmer, organic beef farmer, tillage farmer, and we're out trying to shift more towards tillage. And I see, I'm part of the establishment really, we're like mainly beef. And a lot of the livestock producers and representative bodies that are often with food security. We went to organic farm, but who's out to feed to our food security?
Don't pay that.
You're talking like human food, which is a 6 to 10 times for every kilo of product produced. It's a question of land. We're using land that should be producing human food. If I call her Herbie says this, we're using land that should be growing in a rotation often, some animal feeding, some vegetables, but because there's no market there for vegetables and producers can't afford to do it. We have a massive market for vegetables which we're importing. We have no market for our beef and milk globally compared to what we're producing. We're using land we could use to grow vegetables, to feed animals, to export it to China. Like, is that it?
Yeah.
And you're talking about social inclusion. It's right, we need something that has a market, that needs a lot of labour and buy, like organic or even conventional vegetable production. When there's also a market already available, like this regulator just needs the supermarkets are using vegetables to draw people into eating processed food. It's ridiculous.
Do you want to quick response to that, Brian?
So I'm kind of in-depth conversation with one of the large supermarkets right now that we've gone on for the last 18 months. So this particular supermarket has doubled its sales in organic vegetables year on year for the last 3 years. So the system that I've been working to develop with them is for each store there is an adjacent farm, either on site or close to site, that supplies directly into the store. All the produce grown on that farm, fruit and veg, is sold through that store at agreed prices that are sustainable and that are also taken into account with inflationary pressure for gas, CMOs, or whatever the hell it is. That's being agreed now as a principle with the supermarket now in Ireland, and that's going to happen. So we can't all bash the system all the time. We have to try and come up with a solution and fix something.
Hope to see you.
You have to,
This lady here.
So we're in the last session there, the conversation about forestry, and forestry is really useful in the right place, but it's not in the right place, and it's taken more harm than good. And I understand meadowlands can be very effective for carbon sequestration. Obviously, our production of food locally is really important for all kinds of sustainability and regeneration. What it does, it seems to me that all the grants are available for afforestation, and there aren't, as far as I'm aware, grants available for planting meadowlands and or having a soil living local organic farm that supplies the community. And also what you were saying about soil subsidizing, I was wondering, first of all, what grants? I'm a landowner, I don't know about them, and why are there? And also, like you were saying about the soil sampling, is there some kind of a framework for identifying areas that are suitable for meadowland, for dairy farming, for beef farming, or organic farming, and targeting the right kind of regenerative farming in the right place?
There is a land use plan coming up. It's to be delivered. I don't know how significant do you think it is. Just in terms of what I think you're saying is you're talking about like integrated trees into farms rather than
agroforestry.
And like there's some coming down the tracks talked about it, like around agroforestry, and it can be layered on top of an organic payment and layered across on top of your basic payment. So there will be good options, very good options for kind of not necessarily intensive dairy farmers, but like suckler farmers, sheep farmers in the West Wales. There's definitely options coming down the tracks for them. In terms of some of the other elements of your question, the sampling or whatever you might have.
Yeah, the department had a soil sampling programme. It was poorly rolled out, to be honest. It got locked, but it's something I see coming again, which is, I think, is good. Now it's probably going to be used for the department in terms of doing a survey of land types around the country. So that's there. And I genuinely think as a farmer, doesn't matter what you're farming or what system of farming, the first thing you do is you test your soil, get to know your soil, and no matter what sort of farming you're in, I think this is the first step. The piece on the afforestation is complicated. I'm not going to get I will say one thing, right? We have, from a farmer's point of view, the association I represent, and as a farmer, we sometimes get a bad name and be anti-forestry. We're really not. Our point about it is that forestry needs to be made attractive to farmers and landowners. And currently it's just not. The system is, we know what the system's like. And the forestry plan is in Europe at the minute. And all the indications is going to be sent back to them. We might not have a forestry program.
I say if people cared more about forestry or trees, there'd be a tribunal in Ireland about what's happened. There really would have been, and I am 100% with you on that. But it doesn't surprise me that no farmers are getting into forestry. It does not surprise me.
But it's which around is so negative, you know what I mean? It is. Yeah.
So some interesting forestry done without having.
So again, integrated systems. We've almost a schizophrenic approach to agroforestry. It's a monoculture of cypress sitting on the side of a hill, or it's a monoculture of ryegrass in a field. Trees have way larger role to play within an integrated system. We can have wider hedgerows, we can have corners there. Agroforestry, there's loads and loads of trials around the world that show that you can have 1.4 to 1.6 increase in production by integrating systems. So again, even when we have a ryegrass, we don't want to have ryegrass to add one bit of clover with it. If you went into a field, a self-productive field 40, 50 years ago, you'd have multiple types of grasses, all kinds of herbs. Every mineral and nutrient that the animal needed came out of it. When it comes to testing your soil, grand, test your soil. But you'll go get a conventional test, it'll be a Morgan's test. That'll only tell you what salts are soluble inside in the water. If you did a Melic test will tell you what was biologically available inside the soil, and a total acid digest will tell you what's in the bedrock underneath it. So you could do a one-off total acid digest, see what's in your mineral bedrock, know what's missing in your plants, and understand that what's missing is the biology that was breaking down the bedrock in the system to provide the nutrients. Once we do that, then we need to buy in fertilizers. When we test what's inside in the soil with the Morgan's test, we're testing what's soluble and what soluble fertilizer we can put on it. There's all these minerals locked up in the biology in the rock and the soils that are available for the plants if the biology is working right. So a test is good, but you need to understand the framework that the test
Good
is coming
example
from.
of that, as you're well aware, Thomas, and really, I know that this gentleman here I'll give him a last question, but you're probably all familiar with some of the things Alba can do, not only through a relationship with a bacteria called Frankialni. It can sequester atmospheric nitrogen and put it into the soil, but it secretes a very light carboxylate acid that can weather minerals and release phosphorus. So there is amazing soil interactions. I think everyone on the panel would be kind of thinking we know more about outer space than we do about soil. Sam, you have a bit of agroforestry.
No, I don't have any agroforestry.
You do?
I grow hazelnuts as a horticulture system. Very good. It's a monoculture hazelnuts in a 4-acre field. It's not too ahead of ourselves. But a few things there, and I just want to follow on Thomas's point there about soil samples. A soil sample is only as good as the person interpreting it. So all you people and they've got many soil samples, and they have every mineral analysed, everything's there. They're fantastic soil samples, fantastic soil reports, I should say. They don't know what to do with them. Yeah. So then they sit in the filing cabinet. They're actually going to do more with your basic pK and soil pH, and I would say throw in an organic matter test in there as well.
Point test, well.
Yeah, have those there. Start small and then kind of build your way up through. There used to be a great soil sample that was very common in our part of the country, it was called the sugar factory test, because it had all your trace minerals in it. And everybody putting in sugar beets got that test done, and then that fed through the rest of the system. I was talking to Brian about some farmers we know, and they're almost all dairy farmers now, but they would have had sugar beets in their system up to about almost 20 years ago. So that then would have fed back into their grass system what minerals have been boosted there through the rotation. So have a good soil sample, but also find good people that can interpret it for you. The other thing I would say is, there was a grant rolled out for soil sampling. It wasn't very well implemented. And I know farmers that signed up for it because they wanted their farm soil sampled, and then they also went off and got someone to privately soil sample the farm because they needed those results in their hand to plan for the year ahead.
I might dive in there because I'm conscious. Go on.
But I'll grants for soil samples, and there's a grant for lime as well. Like, to me, as an agronomist, I kind of bang my head off the wall as to why they're there. Because if you want to farm your land right, you have to know what's going on in your soil. That's up to you. I feel that's up to the farmer. That's something the farmer can take responsibility of.
Yes, let's talk more, about grants for planting meadowland and for
Yeah, okay.
There's one specific
Behavioural change.
small farmers, so they have included farms now, I think of 1 acre, an acre and a half into the new organic practice, so you can if you're a small.
I assume the line thing is, as you were saying, there's got to be something for the lads at the back of the class to say, well, it shouldn't be that way. It should be like, why?
Our race, behavioural change, that's the drive, yeah.
The gentleman here will
one point there, just check your multiples and below cost.
Yep.
That probably single-handedly both in the dairy sector.
Chris Lines for no with liquid milking supplied from Corks, even in the all labels at the end of the rest, the single-handedly done war harm the farming, I would argue, in the last 2 or 3 decades, particularly horticulture as well. Like, when you have situations where strawberry suppliers in this country are told for every 10 punnets that you're supplying, you must supply them, as half that straight away they dump 10% of their production. And with all offsetting does not enough for sustainability. You talk about sustainability, people are from at it. Sustainability is a fair price and fair income to a farmer as well. And just last point on regenerative farming, that it's big news now, particularly in cereal power, right? So with Diageo, for example, in it, with Arctic farmers, they're doing soil carbon testing, they're putting cover crops in, reserve rock, whatever. But the point is, 5 cents in that point is going to the farmer. He's like going to need 7 cents. It's not enough, they want to take off it. So you see their rights in a massive way, and they are sustainable farms, which could be environmental benefits that are required, but bring everyone with them. Would that go to a shareholder? Who's the shareholder? Is it the other shareholder? It's not a farm, which is
Just comment just on that. So the Azure thing, I'd be cynical enough on it now. You know, it's an ESG measure, and that's, you know, unfortunately that's what it is, and you'd love to see it something properly or hard.
It's your initiative, Brian. McCarthy sounds amazing, but you know, like a farm next to a supermarket, I'd have slight concerns that it's used as window dressing rather than changing the fundamental relation. No, I'm sure you're looking at that. Like.
But just the point of liquid milk is a really good one. And if anyone in this room, and if you're buying milk, if you're buying milk later on, buy a farmer-owned brand. Buy an Avonmore. I don't know what the brand is around here. Lee Valley, if you're down, you know, buy a farmer-owned brand, because that's supporting farmers at a higher price point. But the own brand milks has led to massive suppression of price, and it is consumed farmer-owned brands. So buy farmer-owned brands.
Didn't take home. Yeah. There was one of the comments I was at recently. There was Alex. He was an egg producer, and he was like, "Buy medium-sized eggs." He's like, "If you want to support farmers, buy medium-sized eggs, because they're get crucified. They're all that big eggs, and they're making so much of it."
But sorry, on that, and if you go with the Lidl on, the discounters are particularly guilty about this. Is they have Coolree and Cool Bond and these lovely sounding. They're private label. Yeah. They're private.
And this gentleman with the beard, and then we're going to wrap it. A very quick question about headings and a bit of everything, about access to land for the engines. And I've been in Prowse for a few years, and I'm flying to side lands in Ireland. And first of all, the price is shit. But the prompt by one time after our organisation, you can go to actually, like, you're like, okay, me and my client, me and my partner, I want to buy 10 acres. Where we'll start a small garden. They will match you up, and then we'll maybe the two of you. Like, they just say this, then Ryan said, and it was gives them the sun and shape up with the social sustainability communities, and there's just, you know, there's tons of opportunity with act with land and at the moment. But that for pre-entrance, it's practically impossible unless you inherit mackerel out of it. You want to see
there was the land mobility service. It was like for retirees, and this one was very dairy focused, to be honest. There was a guy in Countrywide last weekend. The guy moved down from Dublin and he bought 20 acres down in Roscommon. It was a very interesting story, but you put like land in, or like the statistic is frightening about how many times it changes hands, or a block of land that is like it's over hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's such a frustration for all farmers. And I do think that if we made access, and I don't have the answers for you, one of the things is we have a lot of farmers in Ireland. We have a lot of smaller, so you know what I mean, compared to other parts. So there's a big demand for land. So it is now, right? Obviously, might have a bit.
17 acres last week for 425,000.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I know.
I'm involved in
I'll say to you.
Cork Food Policy Council, and we're currently setting up an initiative called Cork Food Hub. And what we're doing is we're creating an area of about 100 acres for people exactly like yourself. So it'll be a larger scale land scheme where basically you've got access to land for new entrants. So smaller, it's kind of 10, 5 smaller acreages. That's what I need. And that's trying to combine efforts with people and trying to have access to infrastructure, access to education, everybody leaning on each other to help each other to raise each other's game rather than banging against each other.
Everyone has this more
I think that the opportunity there is to rebuild relations between the older farmers and the new generation that are coming up. I think the older farmers that are still deeply connected to land and hold the land, they're quite disappointed with the way things are, and the stud damage is done. They'd like to leave it a bit better, but they're also socially isolated. So there's no reason we couldn't have social or community schemes where people that want access to land can go out and work with an old farmer, have access to a few acres, they can build a relationship, and then it isn't just an economic transaction.
But there needs to be some kind of mechanism.
There does, absolutely. To facilitate it.
Yeah,
Going through an intermediary. Really quick, lads.
Yeah, you made a point there about, what areas of land should be doing what kind of farming. Very simple there. Go around and talk to your neighbours. Yeah. And that's part of the social sustainability thing. Drive up their farm driveway. They probably haven't seen anyone all day. Go and talk to them. Buy them a pint in the pub. Go down. There's there's a trucker's diner near me, and it's full of farmers, and they all go for the dinner there, but go and talk to them. You know, like those people are everywhere, and they mightn't look like you might look like them. That might cause, you know, a bit of tension to start, but if they think you're interested in farming, they want to talk to you.
I agree with you, but in terms of the national direction,
yeah, I don't know, sometimes we look to do, like, it's like that thing I'm saying, I come across farmers all the time that previously were looking outside the farm gate for saying their problems are out there. Like, that's something you can go and control yourself. You go and walk into a farm and say, you know, what's going on, what are you doing?
I agree with that.
And that was something like, my wife is from New Zealand, and like out there, like, farmers would talk to people all, like, if you drive in their gate, they'll talk to you.
That was great. I might leave you a couple of closing remarks in it.
Okay, I'll just build off that last point because it relates. So I think control is out there. It's collective action we all need to play a part. But I do think the power dynamics need to be addressed because we need to facilitate that as well. I think government, without blaming going into, we need to see them as a facilitator rather than a fixer, and private sector needs to play a role. But really, I think the main last comment I would have is, especially in light of the fact that nobody in this room is happy except me. I should have raised my hand. I'm not very happy, but I am happy. The Irish food system, for all its flaws, is one of the best in the world, and the direction and the potential for it is huge because we are so small. And so when you very passionately and eloquently expressed your frustration with the supermarkets, we have a really solid, empowered community compared to the rest of the world. We're a high-income country, we have citizens, we don't need to be just consumers. So it is really, it's opportunities like this and some of the great people in government, some of them not so great, but some of them great and driving things in the right direction. I think there's a lot of reasons to be very hopeful, and I know the earlier panel has Barry didn't feel so hopeful. I think there are times like that, but really, I think we have a lot of potential here, and we're in a really good spot. And so that's the words I'm keeping on.
Thanks so much, guys.